The dining hall hushed entirely as the fruit smoothie splattered against her blouse, purple goo mingling with leftover chili in a revolting smear across her front. Right then, as a sea of students pointed their tablets at her mortification, Brianna O'Connell understood her world was about to undergo a major shift. Towering over her, Genevieve Hawthorne's flawlessly painted fingernails still glistened with the remains of what she'd just hurled. The redhead's hazel eyes glittered with malicious delight as she assessed her artwork. All around her, a swarm of state-of-the-art tablets documented every bit of the spectacle. "I'm not sure when they started letting trailer trash into Crestwood Academy," Genevieve announced, her voice echoing off the polished granite walls of the hall. "Guess they'll take anyone nowadays to look good on paper." Brianna sat frozen at the side table, her green eyes fixed on the scattered remnants of her art portfolio. Half a year of effort, endless nights bent over their rickety desk, while Nana worked overtime at the diner, all of it now ruined beneath Genevieve's expensive boots. The elaborate ceiling lights cast shifting patterns across the scene as Genevieve ground the papers deeper into the floor. Every twist of her snakeskin shoe sent another fragment of Brianna's dream collapsing into an unreadable mess. "What's the matter?" Genevieve went on, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Can't afford fresh materials? Or did they only let you in thinking people like you are good at scrubbing toilets?" Giggles burst from Genevieve's group of friends, each titter bouncing off the high ceilings like tiny darts. Brianna's hands trembled as the smoothie dripped from her collar onto her worn-out boots. She leaned down, desperately trying to rescue what was left of her drawings. But something stopped her from hitting back. Inside her head, she heard Coach Flanagan's gravelly voice. "Real strength is knowing when to hold back, kiddo. The best fighter wins without a brawl." Brianna slowly stood up, smoothie still trickling from her blouse. Her gaze met Genevieve's for just a split second, and in that instant, something sparked, something icy and resolute that made Genevieve take a step back without meaning to. Without saying a word, Brianna gathered her ruined stuff and headed toward the door. Each step left dark purple marks on the spotless floor, tracing her path like a promise written in silence. The crisp wind blew through Crestwood Academy's walkways as Brianna trudged home, her stained blouse a clear reminder of the morning's humiliation. The bus trip to the north end of town felt even longer than usual, each passing block taking her farther from the world of wealth and closer to reality. Apartment 2B was a world away from the granite halls of Crestwood Academy. The aroma of fried potatoes and cleaning fluid greeted her as she quietly slipped inside, hoping Nana wouldn't see her messy state. "Brianna, honey, you're back early." Her grandmother's voice floated from the kitchen, weary but caring. Margaret O'Connell came out wearing her diner uniform. Grey hair pulled back in a tight braid, despite having worked a 10-hour shift. "Just finished up today, Nana," Brianna replied, forcing cheerfulness into her voice while subtly hiding her stained shirt behind her bag. Margaret's wrinkled hands gently cupped Brianna's face. "You work too hard, sweetie. Your mother would be so proud of everything you've done. Mr. Davis from the school told me you're the best artist he's seen in years." The mention of her mother sent a pang through Brianna's heart. 5 years had gone by since the car crash that took her, leaving them with nothing but medical bills and memories of Sunday afternoon painting sessions at the park. After Margaret left for her evening shift, Brianna finally let herself fall apart. She pulled out the soggy pieces of her art portfolio, tears mixing with the chili stains as she realized months of work were gone. But as darkness fell, something changed within her. She dragged the old easel to the middle of their cramped living room and set up the worn canvas her mother had given her years ago. Standing in the small space, she shut her eyes and took a deep breath. The shame and anger from the dining hall turned into fuel for each stroke. Precise lines, swirling patterns, colors blended in perfect harmony with her breathing. Her reflection in the window showed a small figure, but one burning with steadfast determination. Each motion was more than art. It was a silent vow. One day, the world would see Brianna O'Connell not with pity, but with admiration. Meanwhile, across town in a modern house overlooking the lake, Arthur Hawthorne paced behind his glass desk. His usually calm manner broke as he ended an angry call with Crestwood Academy's headmaster. "A scholarship student embarrassed my daughter." His voice thundered through the house. "That girl will learn her lesson, or she'll find herself back where she belongs, on the streets." At Crestwood Academy, the administrative offices buzzed with worry. Principal Johnson sat across from Ms. Evans, the school counselor, both faces serious as they discussed the viral video that had blown up online overnight. "The Hawthorne family funded the new library," Ms. Evans said carefully. "We can't risk losing their support over a small incident." Principal Johnson took off his glasses, fatigue etched on his face. "But we can't ignore what happened. If this gets more attention, we'll face scrutiny we're not ready for." The video had indeed gone viral, not because people supported Genevieve's actions, but because Brianna's composed response had touched a nerve. Comments flooded in, praising her strength and condemning the obvious bullying. Greater Than Stand With Brianna began trending locally. Back in the North End apartment, Brianna discovered something that would change everything. While browsing art contest websites on her laptop, a striking banner caught her eye. Citywide Youth Art Competition. Winner receives $5,000 art supply grant and gallery showing. Her heart raced as she read the details. The contest was in 2 weeks, and participants could showcase any artistic medium: painting, sculpture, digital art. The grant money would not only help with art supplies, but could also ease Nana's financial strain. But doubt crept in right away. Would they let someone like her compete against the wealthy students who dominated such events? And even if they did, could she possibly win against professionally trained artists with expensive tutors and studios? The next morning at Crestwood Academy brought new problems. Brianna walked through halls where whispers followed her every move. Some students looked at her with newfound interest after seeing the viral video, while others sneered with poorly hidden disdain. In art class, she partnered with David Chen, one of the few other scholarship students. As they worked on their painting, Genevieve accidentally knocked into their table, spilling paint thinner across Brianna's canvas. "Whoops," Genevieve said with exaggerated innocence. "My bad." Mr. Davis looked up from his desk with annoyance. "Miss O'Connell, clean that up now. That's a failing grade for today's project." Brianna opened her mouth to protest, but Mr. Davis's harsh stare silenced her. The rules at Crestwood Academy were clear. Scholarship students were always at fault. After school, Brianna found herself at Mrs. Thompson's pottery studio in the community center. The elderly artist had been her mother's friend and had continued teaching her for free after the accident. "Your skill is amazing, but your spirit is wounded," she observed as she worked on a sculpture. "Remember, art is not about defeating others, it's about expressing yourself." "They'll never accept me, Mrs. Thompson," Brianna said, her voice cracking. "No matter what I do, they've already made up their minds about who I am." Mrs. Thompson placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then show them who you really are. The art contest is coming. You are ready." That evening, Brianna sat at her laptop, the art contest registration form glowing on the screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she wondered whether to enter. The competition would pit her against students with every advantage: money, connections, professional training. But as she looked around their simple apartment, seeing the stack of bills on the kitchen table and her grandmother's worn shoes by the door, determination hardened within her. She typed carefully, "Participant name, B. Rivers." Close enough to her real name, but vague enough to avoid immediate recognition. Under art medium, she wrote, "Oil painting." Her finger hesitated over the submit button for a long moment before clicking. The confirmation appeared. Registration successful. Exhibition slot greater than 9 inches. Brianna leaned back in her chair, her heart pounding. She had just committed to the biggest gamble of her life. Over the following weeks, Brianna's schedule became brutal. She woke at 4 a.m. to paint before school, endured increasingly hostile treatment from Genevieve and her friends during classes, then came home to care for her grandmother and paint until midnight. Margaret's health had been declining due to the stress of working extra hours, but she refused to slow down. "Just a few more months, honey, and we'll have enough saved for your college applications," she would say, coughing into her handkerchief. At school, the mystery of B. Rivers became the talk of Crestwood Academy. The art contest participant list had been posted, and speculation ran wild about who would dare compete against the established artists at such a prestigious event. "Probably some loser from the after-school program," Genevieve sneered to her friends. "My digital art installation will crush whatever amateur garbage they're planning." But privately, Genevieve was struggling. Her parents had hired an expensive designer, and the pressure to win was huge. Arthur Hawthorne had made it clear that failure was not an option. The family's reputation depended on her victory. Brianna, meanwhile, found an unexpected ally in Mr. Chen, no relation to David, the school's janitor. After witnessing Genevieve's bullying firsthand, he had quietly begun supporting Brianna. "I've seen your work in the trash," Mr. Chen said after school one day. "You have something real. Don't let them take it from you." The night before the contest, Brianna sat with her grandmother in their small kitchen. Margaret had just come back from another exhausting shift, her hands shaking as she counted their remaining money. "Dr. Bills came today," Margaret said softly. $3,000 for the tests. I don't know how we'll manage." Brianna squeezed her grandmother's hands. "Don't worry, Nana. I have a plan." The morning of the contest arrived cloudy and damp. Crestwood Academy's art gallery had been transformed into a dazzling venue with professional lighting and display stands funded by the Hawthorne family. Parents in designer clothes filled the gallery, their jewelry sparkling under the spotlights. Backstage, nervous energy filled the air as students prepared their artwork. Brianna sat quietly in a corner, her simple painting resting carefully beside her. Around her neck, she wore her mother's old necklace, her only connection to her. Genevieve came out from the dressing room in an elaborate outfit, her makeup professionally done. She spotted Brianna and smirked coldly. "Well, well, the scholarship girl thinks she can compete with us?" Genevieve's voice carried enough to draw attention from other contestants. "This isn't some community center art show, sweetheart." Brianna stayed quiet, but her eyes held steady. Inside, she repeated her mother's words. "Turn your pain into art, honey. Let them underestimate you." The contest began with a series of digital art displays, followed by sculpture presentations. Genevieve's turn came midway through the program. Her digital art installation was technically perfect, clearly professionally designed, and presented with the confidence that comes from wealth. The audience applauded politely, and Genevieve's parents beamed from the front row. But observant viewers might have noticed the slight tremor in her hands and the way her eyes searched the judges' faces for approval. Then the announcer's voice boomed, "Exhibition greater than 9, oil painting by B. Rivers." The gallery fell quiet as a small figure in a simple outfit walked onto the stage. Brianna nodded politely to the audience, then took her position next to her painting. The canvas was covered, hiding her work from view. She stepped forward, removed the cloth, and stepped back. At first, some audience members looked confused or dismissive. But gradually, as her painting was revealed, a hush fell over the gallery. Each brushstroke was perfectly executed, each color beautifully blended. She moved with a grace that seemed to defy the limitations of the medium. The painting depicted a scene from her life. A portrait of her grandmother working at the diner, surrounded by the warm glow of the kitchen lights. The details were incredibly realistic, capturing the wrinkles on her grandmother's face and the weariness in her eyes. Wooden easels appeared, holding the painting in the spotlight. The sharpness of the lines, the boldness of the colors echoed through the hall as Brianna showed the strength of her techniques. Murmurs rippled through the audience. But the most stunning moment came when Brianna stepped back and revealed a secret element of the painting. The canvas was actually a lenticular print, and as the viewers moved, the image changed, showing her grandmother smiling and full of life. The presentation built to a crescendo as soft music played. Brianna's final sequence was breathtaking. A small model of the diner appeared, and light shone from inside, illuminating the entire hall with a warm glow as the music ended. Silence filled the gallery for a heartbeat before thunderous applause erupted. The audience rose to their feet, many wiping tears from their eyes. In that moment, Brianna was no longer the scholarship student or the girl from the wrong side of town. She was an artist, a visionary, a creative genius. In the wings, Genevieve stood frozen, her carefully applied makeup running as tears of disbelief streamed down her face. For the first time in her life, she had been completely, utterly surpassed. The judges deliberated for what felt like hours before returning to announce the results. Third place went to a clay artist. Second place was awarded to Genevieve for her digital art, a consolation prize that fooled no one. And first place, with a unanimous decision from our judges, the announcer proclaimed, goes to B. Rivers for an extraordinary oil painting. The gallery exploded in applause as Brianna walked onto the stage to accept her trophy and the $5,000 art supply grant. As she stood under the spotlights, she saw her grandmother in the back row, tears streaming down Margaret's face as she clapped proudly. Principal Johnson approached the microphone. Before we conclude tonight's contest, I'd like to address something important. This evening has reminded us that real talent comes from heart and soul, not privilege or wealth. Brianna O'Connell, yes, we know who you are, embodies the best of what Crestwood Academy tries to be. The revelation of her identity sent whispers through the crowd, but the applause only grew louder. Students who had ignored her for months now looked at her with real respect and admiration. In the weeks that followed, everything changed at Crestwood Academy. The viral video of Brianna's presentation spread across social media, bringing positive attention to the school and emphasizing the importance of supporting students from all backgrounds. Arthur Hawthorne, faced with public pressure and the undeniable evidence of his daughter's behavior, quietly dropped his demands for Brianna's expulsion. Genevieve herself seemed changed by the event, becoming quieter and more thoughtful. A month later, Brianna found herself in an unexpected situation. Genevieve approached her in the library, looking surprisingly vulnerable. "I owe you an apology," Genevieve said quietly. "Not because my parents are making me, but because I've never had to work for anything before. Seeing you up there made me realize how shallow my accomplishments really are." Brianna studied Genevieve's face, seeing real regret for the first time. "We all have different struggles," she replied. "Maybe it's time we used our talents for something meaningful." With the grant money, Brianna was able to help with her grandmother's doctor bills and fund her art studies. But more importantly, she had found her voice and her place in the world. Mrs. Thompson watched proudly as Brianna began teaching younger students at the community center, passing on not just art skills, but the deeper lessons of creativity, passion, and perseverance. "Your mother would be so proud," she told her one evening, as she worked with a shy 7-year-old whose family couldn't afford regular lessons. Brianna smiled, adjusting the girl's brush. "Turn your fear into focus," she instructed gently. "Every artist was once a beginner who refused to give up." Months later, Brianna received acceptance letters from several top art schools, all offering generous scholarships based on both her artistic talent and her inspiring story. The girl who had once been dismissed as scholarship trash was now being sought after by institutions eager to have her represent their values. But perhaps the most important moment came during graduation, when Brianna was chosen to design the graduation art installation. As she stood at the unveiling, looking out at her classmates, including Genevieve, who was among those cheering, she thought about the journey that had brought her there. True artistry, she began her speech, isn't about never making mistakes. It's about learning from them, using that knowledge to grow, and using your art to inspire others to reach their full potential. In the audience, Margaret O'Connell wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her granddaughter command the respect of everyone in the room. The young woman on that stage carried the same creative spirit as her mother, but she had paved her own path to success. As Brianna finished her speech and stepped down from the stage, she knew her story was just beginning. The girl who had once cleaned paint thinner from her canvas while enduring the cruel laughter of her peers had transformed that humiliation into fuel for greatness. The path ahead would bring new challenges: college, career, and the ongoing fight for access and opportunity. But Brianna O'Connell faced the future with the strength of someone who had already proven that no amount of prejudice or privilege could defeat a spirit that refused to be silenced. In the end, she had done more than survive Crestwood Academy. She had transformed it, leaving behind a legacy that would encourage future students to believe that their dreams were worth fighting for, regardless of where they came from or how many obstacles stood in their way. In the end, she had done more than survive Crestwood Academy. She had transformed it, leaving behind a legacy that would encourage future students to believe that their dreams were worth fighting for, regardless of where they came from or how many obstacles stood in their way. 20,426 characters.